So my boss thought he could humiliate me for leaving 10 minutes early after working unpaid overtime? Well, let me tell you how I got my revenge by following his rules exactly as he demanded and watching his face turn ghost white as I hung up on a $1 million client at 6 p.m. sharp. This is how malicious compliance destroyed my toxic manager's career. Hey everyone, my name is Jake Martinez, and I'm a 32-year-old financial analyst from Chicago. I've been working in banking and finance for about 8 years now, and let me tell you, I've seen some pretty wild stuff in corporate America. But nothing prepared me for what happened at Midwest Financial Services about 4 years ago. This story is about how I got the sweetest revenge on my micromanaging boss using nothing but his own rules against him. So picture this, it's 2020, and I just landed this decent gig at a mid-sized regional bank here in downtown Chicago. The pay was solid, benefits were good, and I figured I'd finally found a place where I could settle in and build my career. Boy, was I wrong about that last part. The first few months were pretty smooth. I was doing back-office operations, basically crunching numbers, preparing reports, and making sure all our financial data was squeaky clean for the regulators. It wasn't glamorous work, but I'm good with numbers, and I actually enjoyed the analytical side of things. The team seemed decent enough, too. About 12 of us in the department, a mix of younger analysts like myself and some seasoned veterans who'd been there since the Clinton administration. But there was something weird right from the get-go. See, at my previous job at First National downtown, we had what you'd call a modern workplace culture. Flexible hours, work-from-home options, comp time when you put in extra hours, treating employees like actual human beings. But at Midwest Financial, it was like stepping back into the 1950s. Our direct manager was this guy named Robert Chen, called himself Bobby, which somehow made it worse. Bobby was one of those middle managers who'd probably peaked in high school and never gotten over it. Decent enough guy on the surface, but he had this weird obsession with punctuality that bordered on pathological. And then there was his boss, the senior manager, a real piece of work named Marcus Thompson. Marcus was the kind of guy who wore suspenders unironically and thought Casual Friday meant you could skip the tie. Marcus had this whole power trip thing going on. You could tell he got off on making people squirm. He'd walk around the office like he owned the place, which technically he kinda did as senior management, but you know what I mean. The guy had serious Napoleon complex vibes, probably compensating for something. Anyway, about 4 months into the job, I started noticing that Marcus had it out for me. See, I'm not the type to just sit there and nod along when I think something's wrong. My dad always taught me to speak up, ask questions, and never let anyone walk all over you. It served me well throughout my career, but apparently Marcus didn't appreciate that approach. During our weekly team meetings, while everyone else would sit there like mannequins, I'd actually participate. I'd ask questions about processes that seemed inefficient, suggest improvements based on what I'd seen at other firms, and generally try to contribute something meaningful to the discussion. You'd think management would appreciate that kind of initiative, right? Wrong. Marcus would get this look on his face whenever I spoke up, like I'd just farted in church or something. He'd cut me off mid-sentence, dismiss my suggestions without consideration, and generally try to make me feel like an idiot for having the audacity to think. The guy clearly preferred his employees to be seen and not heard, like some kind of corporate dictatorship. The breaking point came during the last week of March. Now, anyone who's worked in financial services knows that month end is absolutely brutal. We're talking 12-hour days, weekend work, the whole 9 yards. Our team was responsible for preparing regulatory reports from multiple jurisdictions. We had clients and operations spread across the Southeast, West Coast, and even some international stuff in Asia. The time zone juggling alone was enough to drive you crazy. That particular week, I'd been busting my butt. Monday through Wednesday, I was pulling my weight and some. Thursday rolls around and we're deep in the weeds trying to get everything ready for the Friday deadline. I ended up staying until almost 8 p.m., nearly 2 hours past my official quitting time of 6. And this was unpaid overtime, mind you. Company policy was that salaried employees didn't get comp time or overtime pay. Friday morning, I'm dragging myself into the office, running on coffee and pure willpower. Bobby was out that day, had some family thing or doctor's appointment, I don't remember which. The point is, I'm thinking to myself, Jake, you put in those extra hours yesterday, you're caught up on your work, maybe you can sneak out a few minutes early and start your weekend. So around 5:50 p.m., I wrap up what I'm doing, shut down my computer, and head for the door. Just 10 minutes early, nothing crazy. I figure I've more than earned it after the week I've had. I grab my jacket, wave goodbye to the few people still at their desks, and head out into the Chicago evening. Monday morning hits like a freight train. I'm barely through the door with my coffee when Bobby intercepts me. "Jake, can I see you in the conference room? Marcus wants to have a word." My stomach drops. You know that feeling when you're a kid and your mom uses your full name instead of your nickname? That's exactly what this felt like. I followed Bobby down the hall to the small conference room they used for disciplinary conversations. Everyone knew what that room was for. Marcus is already there, sitting at the head of the table like he's about to conduct a court-martial. He's got this smug expression on his face, like a cat that just caught a canary. Bobby closes the door behind us and takes a seat. The whole setup feels like an ambush. "Jake," Marcus starts, not even bothering with pleasantries. "Bobby tells me you left work early on Friday." I keep my voice level. "That's right, I left about 10 minutes early." "Did you ask for permission to leave early?" Bobby chimes in like he's reading from a script. Now I'm starting to get annoyed. It was 10 minutes, Bobby. You know I put in nearly 4 hours of overtime last week alone. Why exactly are we having this conversation? Marcus leans forward, and I can see he's enjoying this. "Because you left early without asking for permission. As a senior member of this team, you should be setting an example for the other employees." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "Are you serious right now? Is this actually happening?" "Your working hours are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Marcus continues, his voice taking on this condescending tone, like he's explaining basic math to a kindergartner. "Not 9 a.m. to 5:50 p.m. If you want to leave early, you need to ask for permission from Bobby or myself first. Are we clear on that?" I looked at both of them for a long moment. These guys were seriously power tripping for over 10 minutes. 10 minutes! After all the unpaid overtime I'd been putting in, after busting my butt to meet their ridiculous deadlines, they wanted to write me over leaving 10 minutes. "Crystal clear," I said, making sure to keep my voice nice and even, perfectly clear. And that's when the plan started forming in my head. See, Marcus thought he was teaching me a lesson about following rules and respecting authority. What he actually did was give me the blueprint for the most beautiful act of malicious compliance I've ever executed in my professional career. I walked out of that meeting with a smile on my face that I had to work hard to suppress. These idiots had just handed me the keys to their own destruction, and they didn't even know it. Starting that very day, I became the most punctual, rule-following employee Midwest Financial had ever seen. I showed up at exactly 9 a.m., not 8:55, not 8:45 like I used to when I wanted to grab coffee and settle in. 9 a.m. on the dot. I'd walk through those doors like I was punching a time clock at a factory. At first, nobody really noticed the change, but then the end of April started approaching, and that's when things got interesting. The last week of any month in our department was like preparing for war. We'd typically have people coming in early, staying late, working through lunch, whatever it took to get those reports done and submitted before the deadline. The company never officially required this overtime, but there was this unspoken understanding that if you wanted to keep your job and maybe get promoted someday, you'd do whatever it took. But Marcus had made the rules very clear. My hours were 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., period. No exceptions, no flexibility. So that's exactly what I was going to give him. The last Friday of April arrives, showtime. I stroll into the office at exactly 9 a.m. with a fresh cup of coffee from the Starbucks downstairs. Most of my teammates have been there since 7:30 or 8, already deep into the chaos of month-end reporting. Bobby sees me walk in and raises an eyebrow, but he doesn't say anything. Marcus is nowhere to be seen yet, probably still in some early morning meeting with the other senior managers. I settle into my desk, fire up my computer, and start working at my normal, steady pace. No rushing, no sense of urgency, just doing my job during my officially sanctioned hours. Around 10:20, our first break time rolls around. Now, normally during the month end, nobody takes breaks. Everyone's too busy trying to get everything done. But Marcus had been very clear about my hours and responsibilities, so I figure that includes my legally mandated break time too. I stand up, grab my coffee mug, and head for the break room. You should have seen the looks I got from my coworkers. It was like I'd announced I was going to tap dance on Marcus's desk. Sarah, one of the senior analysts, actually asked me where I was going. "Taking my break," I said cheerfully, "back in 20. I spent those 20 minutes reading the news on my phone and enjoying a nice, relaxing cup of coffee while listening to my coworkers frantically typing away at their keyboards. It was blissful. Lunchtime comes around at 12:30. Again, normally everyone would eat at their desks during month end, cramming sandwiches into their mouths between spreadsheet calculations. But not me. I had plans. "I'm heading out for lunch," I announced to the room in general. "Be back in an hour." Bobby looked up from his computer like I'd just spoken in ancient Sumerian. "You're going out? For lunch? Today?" "Yup, meeting some friends at that new gastropub on LaSalle. You guys have fun." And with that, I grabbed my jacket and walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces and frantic typing. I had a fantastic lunch, by the way. Met up with my college buddy Mike and his girlfriend at this great little place that did amazing Korean fusion tacos. We took our time, enjoyed some good food and conversation, and I made sure to be back at exactly 1:30 p.m. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. The afternoon was when things started getting really interesting. Around 3 p.m., the second break time rolls around. Once again, I'm the only person who actually takes it. I went for a nice walk around the block, enjoyed the spring weather, maybe checked out a few shops, just living my best life while staying strictly within my designated work hours. By 5:30, the tension in the office was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knew we were cutting it close on the deadline. Reports were still being finalized, data was being double-checked, and the senior managers were starting to pace around like caged animals. That's when my phone rang. It was Linda Morrison, one of the senior VPs from our New York office. Linda was a big deal. She reported directly to the regional president and had probably been with the company since the Carter administration. "Jake, we need to talk about the Southeast Regional Report. There are some discrepancies in the Q1 numbers that need to be addressed before we can submit." This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. There were 4 of us on that conference call: myself, Linda, Marcus, who had suddenly appeared at my desk looking stressed, and David Kim from our Atlanta office. We're going through the numbers line by line, making corrections and adjustments. I'm making the changes in real time, sharing my screen so everyone can see the updates. I'm keeping one eye on the clock the whole time. 5:45, 5:50, 5:55. The tension is building, but I'm staying cool as a cucumber. 5:58 p.m. Linda is in the middle of explaining some complex regulatory requirement when I see the clock hit 5:59. 5:59 and 30 seconds. 5:59 and 45 seconds. 6:00 exactly. Linda, I'm sorry, but I have to stop you right there, I said, interrupting her mid-sentence. There was a pause on the line. Excuse me? It's 6 p.m. here in Chicago. My workday is officially over. Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear the confusion through the phone. I'm not sure I understand, Linda said slowly. As per my management here at Midwest Financial, my working hours are strictly 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's now 6 p.m., which means I need to log off and head home. We all have a fantastic weekend. And with that, I hung up the phone, logged out of my computer, and started gathering my things. The office had gone completely silent. You know that moment in movies when the record scratches and everyone stops what they're doing? That's exactly what happened. Every single person in that room was staring at me like I'd just announced I was quitting to become a professional mime. Marcus was standing about 3 feet away from my desk, and I swear his face had gone through about 5 different shades of pale. His mouth was hanging open like he was trying to catch flies. Bobby was just staring at me with this expression of absolute bewilderment. "Jake?" Marcus finally managed to stammer out. What are you doing?" I looked at him with the most innocent expression I could muster. "I'm following the rules you established, Marcus. Remember our conversation a few weeks ago? You were very clear that my working hours are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and that I shouldn't deviate from that schedule without permission. Well, it's now 6 p.m., so my day is done." I put on my jacket, grabbed my briefcase, and headed for the door. As I walked past the stunned faces of my coworkers, I couldn't help but smile. "Sorry I couldn't leave exactly at 6, I called over my shoulder to Marcus. "I hope those extra 4 minutes don't cause any problems. Have a great weekend, everyone." The elevator ride down to the lobby was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire career. I could practically feel the chaos I'd left behind in that office, and it was glorious. But the story doesn't end there, because the fallout from that day was absolutely spectacular. That weekend, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts from work. Bobby called me Saturday morning, Sunday afternoon, and again Sunday evening. Marcus left me 2 voicemails that I didn't bother returning. Even some of my coworkers were reaching out, asking if I'd lost my mind. I ignored them all. After all, it was the weekend, and those weren't my working hours. Monday morning, I strolled into the office at exactly 9 a.m. with my usual Starbucks coffee and biggest smile. The atmosphere was tense. Marcus was waiting for me at my desk, looking like he hadn't slept all weekend. "Jake, we need to talk now." "Sure thing, Marcus. Right after I get settled in and check my emails. It's important to start the day organized, don't you think?" I could see a vein starting to pulse in his forehead. Turns out my little stunt on Friday had caused quite the shitstorm. The Southeast Regional Report was late for the first time in 3 years. Linda Morrison had to call the regulatory office and request an extension, which made the company look incompetent. The New York office was asking questions about our department's reliability. And apparently, the story of me hanging up on a senior VP had already made its way through the company gossip network. Marcus tried to write me up for insubordination. But here's the beautiful thing about malicious compliance. I hadn't actually done anything wrong. I had followed his rules to the letter. He couldn't discipline me for doing exactly what he had demanded I do. Over the next few weeks, I maintained my strict adherence to the 9 to 6 schedule. No early arrivals, no staying late, no skipped breaks, no working lunches. And you know what happened? The strangest thing. My stakeholders started adapting. Linda Morrison started scheduling our calls earlier in the week instead of waiting until Friday afternoon. The Atlanta office began sending their data requests on Tuesday instead of Thursday. Even our Asian clients started coordinating their needs with our schedule instead of expecting us to accommodate theirs at all hours.
It was like magic. When people knew they couldn't count on me to work unpaid overtime, they actually started planning better. Who would have thought? Marcus, meanwhile, was slowly losing his mind. He couldn't figure out how to handle me. I was doing my job, meeting my deadlines, and following all the rules he had established. But I was also completely undermining the culture of unpaid overtime and employee exploitation that he had worked so hard to maintain.
The breaking point came about 2 months later, during the May month-end closing. We had a particularly complex situation involving some regulatory changes that required extra documentation. The whole team was stressed, working late every night, and Marcus was running around like a chicken with its head cut off. Thursday evening, around 5:45 p.m., Marcus approached my desk with a stack of urgent reports that needed to be completed. "Jake, I need these done tonight. We're cutting it close on the deadline." I looked at the clock on my computer screen. "It's 5:45, Marcus. I've got 15 minutes left in my workday. I don't think that's going to be enough time for all this." His face started turning red. "Then you'll need to stay late and get it done." "But you were very clear about my working hours, remember? You said I need to ask permission if I want to deviate from the 9 to 6 schedule." "Fine, I'm giving you permission to stay late." I shook my head sadly. "I'm sorry, Marcus, but you also said I needed to ask permission, not that you would give it to me. Since I didn't ask, and since it's almost 6 p.m., I think it's best if I stick to the established schedule. We can tackle this first thing in the morning." And with that, I saved my work, shut down my computer, and prepared to leave for the day. Marcus completely lost it. He started yelling about deadlines and responsibilities and team players. The whole office was watching as he had what can only be described as a complete meltdown in the middle of the workspace. That's when Bobby finally grew a spine and pulled Marcus into the conference room for a private conversation that everyone could hear through the thin walls. There was a lot of shouting, some choice words about leadership and management styles, and what sounded like Marcus threatening to fire half the department. The next morning, Bobby called me into his office, alone this time. "Jake, I owe you an apology," he started. "Marcus has been difficult to work with lately. His approach to management has been causing problems throughout the department, and what happened yesterday was the final straw." Turns out, Marcus's little public meltdown had been witnessed by several people from other departments, including someone from HR who happened to be walking by. Word had gotten back to the senior executives about the toxic work environment in our department, the excessive unpaid overtime expectations, and Marcus's erratic behavior. Long story short, Marcus was promoted to a new position in the company's satellite office in Newark, which, if you know anything about corporate politics, is basically where they send managers to die quietly. Bobby was given more autonomy to run the department, and one of the first changes he made was implementing a more flexible schedule policy. I stayed with the company for another 10 months after that, just to see how things played out. The department culture completely changed. People started taking their breaks, leaving on time when they weren't actually needed, and pushing back on unreasonable demands. Productivity actually improved because people weren't burned out and resentful all the time. The best part? My reputation within the company went from that troublemaker who asks too many questions to the guy who stood up to Marcus Thompson. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had problems with his management style, and my little act of rebellion had inspired others to start advocating for themselves, too. I eventually left Midwest Financial for a better opportunity at a fintech startup downtown, but I kept in touch with some of my former coworkers. Last I heard, the department was running smoother than it ever had under Marcus, and Bobby had even gotten a promotion to senior manager himself. As for Marcus, well, let's just say that his time in Newark was short-lived. Word through the grapevine was that he tried to implement the same authoritarian management style there and ended up getting fired within 6 months. Apparently, the Newark office had even less tolerance for his bullshit than we did. The moral of the story? Sometimes the best way to deal with a petty tyrant is to give them exactly what they ask for. Marcus wanted me to follow his rules to the letter, so that's exactly what I did. He just never considered what would happen when those rules were applied without the usual exceptions and accommodations that make toxic workplaces function. Looking back on it now, that experience taught me a valuable lesson about standing up for yourself in the workplace. You don't always have to quit or cause a scene to make your point. Sometimes the most effective form of resistance is simply refusing to go above and beyond for people who don't appreciate it. And hey, if you're dealing with a similar situation at your own job, just remember, malicious compliance is an art form. Make sure you document everything, know your company policies inside and out, and never give your managers any ammunition they can use against you later. Follow their rules exactly as written and let them deal with the consequences of their own policies. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Sometimes the best revenge is simply giving people exactly what they asked for. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching.